You think your job is bad? You think dealing with Susan from accounting is the peak of human suffering? That is adorable. Tonight, we're taking a journey back to ancient Rome, a place where your career options ranged from back-breakingly difficult to I have to do what with that bucket. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Midnight Law. Forget the emperors and the senators for a moment. We're not staying on the main road. We're taking a sharp turn down the back alleys where the real work of the Roman Empire gets done. We're exploring the grimy, essential, and profoundly strange jobs that kept the world's greatest city from collapsing under its own weight. This is history from the bottom up, where the heroes aren't generals, but the poor souls who had to deal with everyone else's problems. If you enjoy history, that's a little less marble column and a little more mystery stain, please consider liking this video and subscribing. It confirms that you too have a healthy appreciation for historical misery. Let's begin our walk. The first thing you might notice after the general noise and crowding is the surprising whiteness of a senator's toga as he passes by. It's a dazzling, almost defiant white against the city's dust and grime. It is a symbol of his purity, his civic virtue, his untouchable status. How in a city this filthy does he keep it so immaculate? The answer, my friend, is not soap. The answer lies down a narrow side street where the air grows sharp and stings your eyes. You've arrived at a Filonica, a Roman laundry, and the key ingredient that produces that virtuous white is anything but pure. It is aged, concentrated human urine. Yes, the ammonia in the urine was a powerful cleaning agent for cutting through the natural grease in wool and bleaching it. You didn't just drop off your dirty toga at the laundry. On your way there, you could help create the detergent. Inside the Filonica, it's a vision from a fever dream. The air is thick with choking steam and the sharp, unmistakable smell of ammonia. Workers, often enslaved, stand barefoot in large stone vats, their tunics hitched up to their waists. This is where you work. You spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day stomping on the soiled clothes of Rome's elite in a warm, slimy cocktail of stale pea, water, and fuller's earth. This is the Roman washing machine, and your legs are the agitator cycle, and the guy stomping in the vat next to you. He swears he's starting to taste the difference between the urine of senators and that of common merchants. It's a full-body commitment to hygiene. Just not your own? You ever stomp laundry in human pee for 12 hours? Neither did Marcus Aurelius. Just saying. And as you watch that senator walk by later, his toga glowing like a beacon of civic virtue, you can't help but smile. In Rome, you learn quickly, purity is almost always bleached in filth. So you've spent the day ankle deep in senator piss. You wash, you rinse, you gag. But night falls, and now it's someone else's turn to face the city's darker fluids. Meet the man who handles the leftovers of your leftovers. Meet the stercorarius, the dung collector. He works alone at night with a cart that smells like vengeance and cabbage. No one makes eye contact with him, not even the rats. His job is to empty the city's cesspits. In a city of 1 million people with no modern plumbing, this wasn't just a job. It was a public service of heroic and horrifying proportions. You weren't just at the bottom of the social ladder, you were actively digging your way out from underneath it. But here's the twist that makes it so perfectly Roman. The waste wasn't waste, it was a product, a valuable commodity. This night soil was bought by farmers outside the city as a rich fertilizer for their market gardens. It's the kind of job where, if you do it well, no one thanks you. And if you mess up, everyone in the city knows by breakfast. And if you're wondering what happened to all that glorified dignity of Roman civilization you saw in that senator's white toga, turns out it's on this guy's cart, right next to the ingredients for tomorrow's salad. So you've survived your first day in the Roman job market. You've stomped on pea-soaked togas and collected things that will haunt your dreams. You might think, surely life is better for those who serve the rich. Oh, you sweet, innocent, time-travelling soul. The jobs didn't get less weird for the Roman elite. They just got more complicated and came with fancier titles for the misery. Let's talk about the ornator. This was a highly specialised slave whose entire existence was dedicated to one thing: hair. Not just cutting it, but dyeing it, curling it, and most importantly, faking it. Roman high society was obsessed with appearance, and a full head of impressively styled hair was a non-negotiable status symbol. Your job as an ornator is to make a 60-year-old senator who is losing the war against baldness look like a dashing young Apollo. No pressure. The tools of your trade were frankly terrifying. Curling tongs were heated directly in hot coals, requiring a surgeon's steady hand to avoid branding your master's scalp. Hair dyes were made from, let's call them, artisanal ingredients. Need to cover up some grey? Try a paste of rotten leeches and boiled walnuts. Want to go blonde? That'll be a charming rinse of goat urine and wood ash. You weren't just a hairstylist, you were a high-stakes, low-paid chemist, performing dangerous experiments on the most powerful heads in Rome. And then, the wigs. A bad wig could bring public shame upon an entire household. If a single, artfully placed curl fell mid-speech in the Senate, you'd hear gasps like someone had just been stabbed. And in Rome, that was often Plan B. Your entire performance review was based on how convincingly your master's hair lied. Now imagine you're at one of these lavish dinner parties. Your master's hair is miraculously intact. He's a powerful politician, and he needs to network. The problem is, he can't remember anyone's name. Forgetting the name of an important senator is a social death sentence. What do? You employ a nomenclator. This was a slave whose only job was to be a living, breathing, absolutely terrified version of LinkedIn. You would follow your master around, standing just behind his shoulder. When someone approached, you had a split second to recognize them and whisper their name, their position, and maybe a useful, slightly scandalous piece of gossip into your master's ear. The pressure was immense. Is that Marcus Livius, or his identical twin brother, Gaius Livius? Get it wrong, and your master looks like a fool. And when your master looks like a fool, he tends to find very creative and very painful ways to express his disappointment later that evening. And if you think that sounds stressful, remember, these are the same people who believe a lopsided wig is grounds for exile. You had to have the memory of a supercomputer and the social invisibility of a ghost. The Roman elite didn't just outsource their memory and their hair, they outsourced their skincare in the strangest way imaginable. Let's leave the dinner party and head to the gladiator school, where the city's most famous athletes trained. After a brutal session, these men, the rock stars of their day, were scraped down with a curved metal tool called a strigil to remove the oil, sweat, and dirt from their bodies. This resulting grime had a name, gluoporta, and it was a luxury good. Wealthy Roman matrons believed this gladiator grime was a powerful aphrodisiac and a top-of-the-line face cream. And your job? You could be the stridularius, the person who does the scraping and carefully collects the prized substance into tiny ornate vials to be sold to the city's wealthiest women. Congratulations, your career is harvesting celebrity sweat. It was, without a doubt, the ancient world's most bizarre form of merchandise. Some people collect art, some people collect books. You collect concentrated gladiator. Let's leave the world of questionable skincare behind and move on to another Roman favourite pastime: performance art at funerals. Meet the Archimedes, the lead funeral mimic. When a prominent Roman died, their funeral was not a quiet affair. It was a piece of public theatre, and you, the Archimedes, were the star of the show. Your job was this. You wore a wax mask perfectly moulded from the face of the now deceased aristocrat, dressed in their finest robes, and walked in the procession, sometimes even riding in their chariot. But you didn't just walk. You had to become the dead man. You had to perfectly imitate his signature limp, his famous hand gestures, the way he condescendingly tilted his head when talking to commoners. You had to be a convincing ghost. If you did it well, it was a moving tribute. If you did it badly, you were just a creepy guy in a mask ruining everyone's day. In Rome, it seems, even death came with a final strange performance review. But why hire just one actor for your funeral when you could have a whole chorus line of grief? Wealthy families also hired preficae, or professional mourners. These were women whose entire job was to have a very public, very convincing emotional breakdown. They would shriek, sob, beat their chests, and tear at their hair, all to demonstrate the sheer, unbearable grief of the bereaved family. It was grief as performance art. Your job description was literally have a complete public meltdown on cue. It was a great system for families who were too busy inheriting property to do their own weeping. Let's leave the funereal mime show behind and head to another Roman favourite pastime: public bloodletting with snacks. Welcome to the Colosseum. What other strange jobs did the arena offer? Meet the Harinarius, the sand raker. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Except the sand you're raking is soaked with blood. And you're doing it while men with nets and tridents are actively trying to kill each other a few feet away. You're the janitor in the middle of a war zone. Your main job skill is an advanced sense of not being where the pointy things are. You had to be quick, invisible, and exceptionally good at not making eye contact with a man who was having a very bad day at the office. You dart out between bouts to drag away a dropped shield and try very, very hard not to become part of the mess you were there to clean. And just when you think you've seen it all, there's one more job at the games: the Sparsio thrower. During the games, to keep the crowd happy, officials would sometimes throw tokens, or sparsiones, into the stands. These could be redeemed for prizes: a loaf of bread, a bottle of wine, sometimes even a leaf chicken. And your job? You were the one who got to throw them. You are the original t-shirt cannon operator, but instead of t-shirts, you're throwing wooden discs that might start a small riot over a free snack. Because nothing says civic generosity like hurling tokens into a half-drunk mob and hoping no one gets trampled to death over a bottle of wine and a paltry surprise. So you buy your cup of hot water from the Lixarius, a small steaming comfort against the city's chill. You hold it in your hands, a tiny, personal fire. As you walk back towards your apartment, you look up. You look up at the towering, precarious wooden insulae, the tenement blocks where most of Rome lives, stacked one on top of the other like dry firewood. Thousands of families are crammed into those buildings. Thousands of little charcoal braziers are being used for cooking in poorly ventilated rooms. Thousands of oil lamps are flickering precariously close to wooden walls and dry textiles. And in that moment, you realize a terrifying truth about Rome. The city is in a constant, quiet battle with itself, always just one stray spark away from becoming an inferno. That brings us to our next job. The men who stood against the flames. Meet the Vigiles, Rome's combination fire department and night watch. It sounds like a noble, respectable job, doesn't it? Except their main firefighting technique wasn't putting the fire out. It was demolishing the neighbouring apartment before it caught fire too. As a vigil, your equipment was basic. Buckets you filled from the nearest fountain, vinegar-soaked blankets you threw optimistically at the flames, and some very large axes. You were less a firefighter and more a frantic, state-sanctioned demolition crew. Congratulations, you've saved the block by destroying half of it. The pay was terrible, the work was dangerous, and your primary reward was not getting crushed by a collapsing building. Most of the time. Once the fires are out and the sun comes up, the city erupts into a different kind of chaos, noise, and at the heart of this noise is the praeco, the public crier. The praeco was a human megaphone, a walking, talking spam filter for the city. Before pop-up ads, there was just a man who would follow you down the street, shouting about the low, low price on slightly used amphorae. They announced public auctions, advertised goods for shopkeepers, and read out official edicts. It required a powerful voice, lungs of leather, and a complete lack of shame. Imagine trying to get 100 people to pay attention to an upcoming sale of pickled fish, while a chariot is rattling past 3 feet away and someone's escaped goat is causing a traffic jam. It was a vital job for commerce and communication, and almost certainly the most annoying one. Now say you bought some of that pickled fish on credit, and you forget to pay. The next person you meet might be the kailactor, the debt collector. This was not a job for the timid. Roman debt collection wasn't about polite reminder letters. It was about direct, personal, and highly intimidating follow-up. The kailactor was often a man of considerable size and questionable morals, whose job was to show up at your door and persuade you to pay. You're not here to negotiate a payment plan. You are the payment plan. The line between legal debt enforcement and simple thuggery was, let's say, creatively blurred. But Rome wasn't all shouting and intimidation. There was a quiet power too, found in the hands of the scriba, the scribe. In a world where most people were illiterate, the ability to read and write was a form of magic. You spend your days in a dusty office, documenting the machinery of the empire. Legal contracts, wills, property deeds, tax records. The work is precise, monotonous, and requires immense concentration. A single misplaced word could change a fortune or start a decades-long legal battle. You spend your days documenting the transfer of vast fortunes, while your own salary can barely afford the questionable sausage from the corner stall. It's the ultimate cosmic irony. While emperors and generals made the loud history, you, the humble scribe, were the one quietly writing it all down. ensuring it would not be forgotten. And in a city of chaos, the quiet power of the written record was perhaps the strangest and most enduring job of all. So you've seen the men who write the laws and the men who enforce them with clubs. You understand that Roman society ran on a complex engine of civic duty, quiet desperation, and a truly staggering amount of pee. But for all its pragmatism, the entire empire was floating on a deep, dark ocean of superstition and anxiety. For all their engineering genius, Romans were terrified of the future. And where there's terror, there's a job opportunity. Welcome to the world of Roman divination. Let's start with arguably the messiest career path, the haruspex. This was a highly respected priest whose specialty was telling the future by inspecting the entrails of sacrificed animals. Yes, you are a professional organ reader. A general wants to know if he should invade Gaul. A merchant needs to know if his shipping venture is blessed by the gods. Your job is to find the answer in a sheep's still warm spleen. You would meticulously examine the liver, its size, its colour, its lobes. You check the heart, the lungs. A dark spot could mean disaster. An oversized lobe might signify success. A missing part? Don't even ask. The fate of an empire could rest on your ability to interpret offal with a straight face. It was a job that required a strong stomach, a steady hand, and an unshakable confidence in telling powerful, paranoid men exactly what they wanted to hear. But what if you didn't have the stomach for viscera? You could become an augur, a more dignified form of fortune-telling. An augur's job was to read the will of the gods by observing birds. You are, essentially, a meteorologist of divine intention. Does the eagle fly to the left or to the right? Are the sacred chickens eating their grain with gusto today, or are they just pecking at it moodily? These were not trivial questions. No major act of state, no battle, no election, no signing of a treaty was undertaken without first consulting the birds. Imagine the pressure. The entire Roman Senate is waiting for your report before they decide whether or not to declare war, and you have to tell them with complete authority that the invasion of Parthia must be postponed because a woodpecker looked at you funny. It was a career path that required a sharp eye for nature and an even sharper understanding of political theatre. If birds weren't your thing, you could always look higher. Meet the Chaldeus, the astrologer. They practiced a craft that was technically foreign, often viewed with official suspicion, and occasionally outlawed. It was also wildly popular with everyone. You practiced a forbidden art that everyone publicly condemned and secretly craved. Your job was to chart the stars at the moment of a person's birth, to predict their fate, to determine auspicious days for getting married or starting a business, and to whisper warnings of impending doom. Emperors would publicly banish astrologers from Rome while privately keeping their favourite one on a secret payroll. This was a dangerous game. A flattering horoscope could make you rich, but a prediction that an emperor might die soon could be interpreted as treason. You weren't just predicting the future, you were navigating the fragile egos of the most powerful people on earth. You had to be a master of ambiguity, a poet of probability, and a very, very good reader of paranoid clients. Narrative of Rome. We've seen the jobs that built Rome's monuments and the jobs that cleaned its togas. But what happened when the most important machine of all, the human body broke down. Welcome to the terrifying and strangely optimistic world of Roman medicine and the people who practiced it. First, let's get one thing straight. Your average Roman doctor wasn't just a doctor. He was often a philosopher, a botanist, and a very confident guesser. But let's talk about a specialist. Meet the tooth puller, the dentarius. There was no anaesthetic, no numbing gel, no soothing music. If you had a tooth that was rotten, infected, or just really annoying, the solution was brutally simple. Violent extraction. Your dentist's primary skills were a strong grip and a complete lack of emotional empathy. You would sit in a chair, someone strong held your head down, and the barber dentist would go to work with a pair of pliers that looked like they were designed to service a chariot. The sounds were not pleasant. Aftercare often involved rinsing your now bleeding and traumatized mouth with wine, which probably felt great for about half a second, and then praying the infection didn't kill you before the pain did. It was less a medical procedure and more a controlled brawl with your own skull. If you preferred a less confrontational approach to health, you could visit the herbaria, the herb cellar. This was the Roman pharmacy, and it was usually a stall in the marketplace run by a wise woman with dirt under her fingernails and a deep practical knowledge of plants. Here, you could find a remedy for almost anything. Got a headache that feels like a legion marching through your brain? Chew some willow bark. It contains salicin, the natural form of aspirin. An upset stomach? Try mint or fennel tea. A wound? Here's a poultice of yarrow to stop the bleeding. It was a world of folk medicine, a mixture of genuine botanical wisdom passed down through generations and a healthy dose of pure superstition. You're not just selling plants, you're selling hope in conveniently bunched leafy form. For every effective remedy like willow bark, there was probably a cure for bad luck that involved chanting at a radish. But in a world without antibiotics, it was the best you had. But what about childbirth and child rearing? This brings us to a vital, common, and deeply intimate profession, the nutrix, or the wet nurse. In wealthy Roman households, it was very common for the mother of the house not to breastfeed their own infants, whether for social reasons for health or to become fertile again more quickly. The task was outsourced. A wet nurse was hired, often a slave or a lower-class free woman who had recently given birth herself and had a good supply of milk. Your job as a nutrix was to provide the most fundamental nourishment and primary care for a child that was not your own, often while your own child was either sent away or fed a less ideal diet. You were a surrogate mother, paid for the most intimate connection a human can have. The selection process was rigorous. Roman writers like Cyrannus of Ephesus wrote detailed guides on how to choose a good wet nurse, advising families to check her physical health, her character. She should be sober, gentle, and not superstitious, and even the taste and consistency of her milk. You became one of the most important people in a young Roman aristocrat's life, a source of food, comfort, and primary affection. This created incredibly complex emotional bonds in a society built on rigid class structures, where the person a child loved most might be considered little more than property. It was a job of profound love and profound sacrifice, a quiet, human story hidden within the grand narrative of Rome. We've walked through the streets, the kitchens, and the sick rooms of Rome. Now let's take a final turn into the darkest corners of the Roman job market, the professions that operated on the very fringes of the law, respectability, and life itself. Meet the carnifex, the public executioner. This was, without a doubt, one of the most despised and socially ostracized jobs in the empire. Romans, you see, had a strange relationship with violence. They loved watching it for entertainment in the arena, but the man tasked with carrying out the state's legal sentences of death was seen as polluted, unclean, and fundamentally taboo. Your job was to be the state's right hand of vengeance. You performed executions, administered torture for legal interrogations, and carried out brutal corporal punishments. You were a necessary component of Roman justice, yet you were forced to live outside the city walls, forbidden from entering most public spaces, and shunned by ordinary citizens. You were the man everyone needed, but no one wanted to know. It's a lonely career path. If the executioner was a public pariah, our next professional was a private one who thrived on paranoia and greed. Meet the delator, the professional informer. In certain periods of the empire, especially under paranoid emperors, the law of treason was a very flexible and profitable tool. If you successfully accused someone of treason, and they were convicted, which often wasn't difficult, you could be legally rewarded with a large portion of their confiscated property. This created a cottage industry of professional snitches. Your job was to ruin people for profit. You would dig up dirt, invent conspiracies, or twist innocent dinner party jokes into treasonous plots, then report your target to the authorities. It was a career built on lies, betrayal, and the quiet terror that permeated the upper classes. You didn't need evidence, you just needed a wealthy target and an emperor in a bad mood. From social poison to the literal kind, let's meet the veneficus or venefica, the poison maker and seller. This was the dark side of Roman chemistry, a trade conducted entirely in the shadows. In a world of vicious political intrigue and bitter inheritance disputes, poison was a disturbingly common, if deniable, solution to a problem. The venefica was a secretive expert in toxicology, someone who knew which plants, minerals, or animal substances could kill quickly, slowly, or in ways that mimicked a natural illness. You were a freelance Grim Reaper, a quiet entrepreneur of death. Your clients were jealous spouses, ambitious heirs, and powerful politicians looking to discreetly remove an obstacle. It was the most dangerous trade of all. If caught, the punishment was swift and excruciating. But for the desperate and the ruthless, you provided a valuable, if terrifying, service. Finally, let's turn from the criminally profane to the dangerously sacred. The Vestal Virgins. This wasn't a job in the traditional sense, but a sacred duty, a high-status calling for women from noble families. Their task was to tend the eternal sacred flame of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth and home, ensuring it never went out. To let the flame die was to invite disaster upon all of Rome. They were revered, granted immense privileges, and held a unique position of honour in Roman society. But this prestigious position came with one of the most terrifying occupational hazards in the ancient world. A Vestal virgin took a 30-year vow of chastity. If she were found to have broken that vow, the punishment was death. A very specific kind of death. She would be taken to an underground chamber, given a small amount of food and water, and buried alive. It's a job with great benefits, and one absolutely terrible workplace accident policy. In Rome, Even the most sacred duties were shadowed by the most brutal consequences. So you've seen the jobs that risk your life in dramatic and often gruesome fashion, from the executioner's block to the astrologer's precarious predictions. You've navigated the fringes of Roman society, where life was cheap and secrets were a currency. But the tapestry of history isn't just woven with the bright threads of spectacle and the dark threads of crime. The vast majority of it is made of something far more mundane, yet just as strange: bureaucracy. Welcome to the quiet, soul-crushing, and absolutely essential world of Roman administration. Let's revisit the scribe, but move past the quiet dignity and focus on the grim reality. You are a public scribe. In a world where most people, including many powerful ones, are illiterate, you are a master of a rare and potent magic, the written word. You spend your days in a dusty office or a cramped market stall, hunched over a wooden desk. Your tools are a reed pen, a pot of ink made from soot and gum arabic, and an endless supply of papyrus scrolls. The work is precise, monotonous, and requires a level of concentration that borders on madness. You are not a poet. You are a human word processor with no backspace key. You spend your morning drafting a marriage contract for a wealthy merchant, ensuring every clause about the dowry is perfect. Your afternoon is spent copying letter for painstaking letter, a legal complaint about a stolen goat. A single misplaced word, a forgotten clause in a will, could start a family feud that lasts for generations. Your hand cramps into a permanent claw. Your eyesight fades from squinting at tiny letters by flickering lamplights. You spend your days documenting the transfer of vast fortunes, while your own salary can barely afford the questionable sausage from the corner stall. It's the ultimate cosmic irony. While emperors and generals were making the loud history, you were the one quietly writing it all down, ensuring the entire complicated machine of Roman law and commerce didn't simply seize up from a lack of paperwork. Now let's talk about a job that combined long walks with social awkwardness. Every 5 years, the Roman state undertook the monumental task of counting every single citizen and assessing their property. You're a census taker. Your job is to go door to door in Rome. Imagine trying to get an accurate head count in a crumbling 6-story apartment building in the Suburra district, where families of 8 live in a single room, and the tenants change more often than the emperor's mood. You knock on a door, trying to make your voice heard over the noise of 6 other families in the same hallway. You, a government official, ask a suspicious, overworked man his name, his age, his wife's name, how many children he has, and what property he owns. He lies, of course. Everyone lies. They hide a child. They undervalue their property. They give you a fake name. You write it all down on your wax tablet, knowing full well it's mostly fiction. Then you move to the next door. And the next. And the next. For months. You weren't a government official. You were a professional optimist with a clipboard, tasked with creating an illusion of order out of pure human chaos. But while you're counting the people, who's counting the water? The great aqueducts were Rome's lifeline, but they weren't self-cleaning. That brings us to the humble but heroic aqueduct maintenance worker. Your job isn't to design the grand arches that grace the postcards of history. Your job is to crawl inside them. The city praises the architectural marvel. They don't know it's all held together by you, a man in a dark, wet tunnel, chipping away at lime deposits with a hammer and chisel. You spend your days in the echoing darkness, sometimes wading through knee-high freezing water, clearing out debris, patching leaks, and making sure the water that reaches the city's fountains isn't half sediment and a few dead rats. It's claustrophobic, damp, and utterly essential. You are the unseen guardian of Rome's most vital artery. And what about the money that paid for all this? You could get a job at the mint. This wasn't a clean, automated factory. A Roman mint was a hot, deafeningly loud, and dangerous place. Your job might be to place a heated blank metal disc or flan between two engraved dies. Then another worker, the striker, swings a massive sledgehammer down with all his might. One single, perfectly calibrated strike. Miss the target, and you could smash your own or your partner's hand. Hit it with the wrong force, and the coin is ruined. You do this thousands of times a day. The percussive, deafening clang of hammer on metal is the soundtrack to your life. The ringing in your ears doesn't stop when you go home. It just becomes part of your personality. These were the jobs that truly ran the empire. The endless, monotonous, thankless tasks that made all the grandeur possible, performed by millions of anonymous people whose only legacy was the smooth road, the clean water, and the small worn coin that passed through 1,000 other hands. So you've seen the quiet, soul-crushing machinery of the Roman state, the endless paperwork and monotonous labour that underpinned the grand spectacle of empire. And so, our walk through the strange, sprawling, and often, frankly, unhygienic job market of ancient Rome comes to an end. We've sifted through the city's filth, attended its bizarre funerals, tasted its possibly poisoned food, and filed its tedious paperwork. We have seen the city not through the eyes of an emperor, but from the ground up. And from down here, the view is very different. What you begin to realise is that Rome wasn't just a city built of marble, brick, and military might. It was a living, breathing, and often grotesquely messy organism. And all these strange jobs, they were the city's essential, unseen bodily functions. The vigiles were its frantic, overworked immune system, rushing to fight the infection of fire. The aqueduct tasters were its wary taste buds. The stercoraria were its brutally efficient digestive tract, turning waste into life. And the scribes, with their endless scrolls, were its memory, patiently recording every transaction and every law. You realise the glory of Rome, the image of eagles and legions and senators in their white togas, was just the skin. We've been looking at the guts. This vast ecosystem of labour was built on a foundation of profound pragmatism and, let's be honest, profound cruelty. Most of these jobs, the dangerous, the disgusting, the demeaning, were performed by the enslaved or the desperately poor. Your value in this world wasn't in who you were, but in the unpleasant, difficult, or dangerous thing you were willing to do for someone else. The same society that wrote soaring poetry about honour and virtue built its comfort on the backs of men who stomped laundry in urine, and women who were paid to fake grief. It was a world that required a high tolerance for irony, and an even higher tolerance for bad smells. And yet, in their strangeness, these jobs feel eerily modern. The nomenclator, whispering names at a party, was just a low-tech social media assistant. The stridularius, bottling gladiator sweat for wealthy fans, was pioneering the bizarre world of celebrity merchandise. The delator, ruining lives for profit with accusations, would have been a superstar on toxic social media platforms. The jobs have changed, the technology is different, but the fundamental human needs they served, for cleanliness, for status, for information, for entertainment, for revenge, haven't changed at all. We are, perhaps, just a little better at hiding the dirty work. The great temples and amphitheatres of Rome are silent ruins now, visited by tourists who walk on stones laid by men whose names are lost to dust. The empire is a memory, but the echoes of their labour, the quiet, persistent, often desperate work of millions of forgotten hands, are still there, holding up the foundations of that history. They were the city, they were the empire, and now they are just whispers in the midnight lore. Let the silence of their forgotten world be your peace. Rest now.